So hello and thank you. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the panel discussion, Poisoned, Hometown Toxin Tragedies. My name is Terry Nordbrock. I was a librarian with the Tucson Public Library until I became an activist in 2001 after my 2-year-old son was diagnosed with leukemia. We met all the families in the Sierra Vista, Arizona childhood leukemia cluster, and we were active in that investigation and the controversy around that issue. I had left the field of librarianship and got a master's in public health, and now I'm executive director of the National Disease Clusters Alliance. And we're a nonprofit working to prevent environmental tragedies like the ones you'll be hearing about today. Discovering links between environmental exposure and disease is challenging. However, it can be done and it must be done. And if we have the proper tools, communication, respect for communities, and science involved, we can do it. It is an honor to serve today as the panel for this discussion, so thank you all for coming. So first up, it is my pleasure to introduce Kristen Iversen, author of Full Body Burden, Growing Up in the Nuclear Shadow of Rocky Flats. Kristen's memoir reveals family secrets and government secrets and the fact that we are not safe from industrial pollution. Her book is a finalist for the Andrew Carnegie Medal of Excellence. It's the best book of 2012 from the American Library Association. It is the best book about justice, chosen by the Atlantic magazine. It's my pleasure to welcome Kristen. And Kristen, my favorite thing about your book is that it's such a page turner. Thank you for telling this important story in such an accessible way. So Kristen, would you take about 10 minutes to tell us about your book?
Thank you, and I'm going to go over to the podium on the other side here. Okay, can everyone hear me? Thank you all for coming. Rocky Flats, the Rocky Flats nuclear weapons facility was the biggest secret of my childhood. I grew up in Arvada, Colorado, just outside of Denver, right between Boulder and Denver. And when I was a kid, we swam in the lakes, we rode our horses around the fields there, we were outside all of the time, and we never knew what was going on at Rocky Flats. When I was a kid, it was operated by Dow Chemical, and the rumor in our neighborhood was that they were making household cleaning supplies. In fact, my mother was convinced that they were making scrubbing bubbles, but they were not making scrubbing bubbles. Over the course of 38 years, Rocky Flats produced more than 70,000 plutonium triggers for nuclear weapons. Each button or trigger contains enough breathable particles of plutonium to kill every person on Earth. There was extensive radioactive and toxic contamination in our neighborhood, and we never knew. Then later, like a lot of kids in my neighborhood, I went to work at Rocky Flats myself. The day that I quit was the day that I knew I would someday write a book about it. 10 years of research and writing went into this book. And I wrote the book to discover, what really happened at Rocky Flats, to learn everything I could about plutonium and nuclear weapons and the crucial role the plant played during and after the Cold War. But it's also a family story, and ultimately I wanted to put a human face on what I felt was a very inhumane story. So what I'm going to do today is show you some things that you won't see in the book. I'm going to tell you the story of Rocky Flats through photographs and contamination maps and that sort of thing, and try to keep it down to 10 minutes, and then hopefully we'll have some questions at the end. One thing that I might point out on the cover here that's kind of neat is that my mother, I didn't know about this until they selected this photo for the book. My mother is sitting right behind me, and my father's shadow is right here. He's the one taking the photo. And my family has been incredibly supportive of this book in so many ways, so it was kind of neat to see their pictures there. Whoops. Okay, I want to just touch briefly on the title. The title, Full Body Burden, I wanted that to work in a literal as well as a metaphorical way. Body burden is the amount of radioactive material present in a human body which acts as an ongoing, internal and ongoing source of radiation. My parents, I was born in Des Moines, Iowa. I come from a Scandinavian family. This is a photo of me with my dad right before we moved to Colorado. And I might mention briefly, my father is of Danish descent. My mother is Norwegian. And when they married, the families considered it a mixed marriage. This is a photo taken at our first house in Arvada, which was about 7 miles from the Rocky Flats nuclear weapons facility. And of course, at that time, we didn't know anything about Rocky Flats. We didn't even know it was there. That's me sitting right in the middle there, between my two sisters. And here is a photo from my backyard. Then, when my brother was born, we moved to a house in a subdivision called Bridaldale, which was about 3 miles from the Rocky Flats plant. And one difference between Los Alamos, which was really the brains of our nuclear weapons program, and Rocky Flats, which we were the production facility. We were the ones who were really producing all of the pits. But people who worked at Los Alamos lived at Los Alamos. People who worked at Rocky Flats lived in the surrounding area, and the plant was entirely dependent upon local population for workers. And it was also located in the wrong place. The earliest engineering report noted that the plant should not be located near a large metropolitan area because of the potential danger to the surrounding population. However, the wind patterns were based on wind patterns at Stapleton Airport on the other side of Denver, rather than where they eventually located the plant here. And when that was discovered by a worker named Jim Stone, he was eventually fired as a whistleblower. So you can see from this photo, one of the problems with this plant being so close to metropolitan area is that the winds come down off the mountains and the foothills very, very quickly and carry contamination right into the local neighborhoods and on into the Metro Denver area. The Atomic Energy Act of 1946 created a complete wall of secrecy between the public and these nuclear facilities. Secret operations at Rocky Flats began in 1952. It was owned by the Atomic Energy Commission, now the Department of Energy, and operated, as I mentioned earlier, by Dow Chemical. From 1952 to 1989, Rocky Flats produced more than 70,000 plutonium pits. These pits provide an atomic bomb's chain reaction. Essentially, we produce the heart of every nuclear weapon in America. Hanford supplied the plutonium, and Oak Ridge supplied the uranium. Here's an aerial view of Rocky Flats. It grew to have more than 800 buildings. Many of those buildings were partially underground, and you couldn't see anything from the road. Companies that operated Rocky Flats, like Dow, Rockwell, and EG&G, were completely indemnified from any catastrophe or liability. Workers at Rocky Flats worked on what were called lines of glove boxes. They would put their hands and their arms into lead-lined gloves to manipulate the plutonium buttons to become triggers. And here's a photo of what a glove box line looks like. Plutonium is highly flammable. It catches fire very easily. And it's difficult to put out a plutonium fire. If you use water on plutonium, you risk causing a criticality, which is a nuclear chain reaction. Rocky Flats produced plutonium triggers, but its biggest output was toxic and radioactive waste. Like many of the kids in my neighborhood, I eventually went to work at Rocky Flats myself. And when I was working at Rocky Flats, there was more than 14 tons of plutonium stored at the facility, much of it unsafely stored. Some of it was stored inside. And here's a photo of workers checking barrels.